Hiya, pals! Welcome to the Mouse Bytes podcast! Here we go! Hello and welcome to Mouse Bytes, the show all about Disney video games, past and present. This is episode 28, and I'm your host, Jeff, joined as always by Clay. How you doing, buddy?
Good, man. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good.
Good.
Getting back into this podcasting thing. It's been a little while.
It has, unfortunately, a little longer than I'd like, but I have no one to blame but myself.
Yeah, it's okay. Sometimes it works out that way. Just thinking about it, the last time we recorded was still winter, technically, by like a week. And we are now on the second day of summer, so not to date the episode too much, but a little three-month break in there.
We took a whole season off, basically.
That's it, yeah. But summer's a good time to play games. Reminds me of what I used to do on my summer vacations growing up.
Yeah.
And so this most recent one we did is called Ratatouille. All right, so Ratatouille, what the heck is this game? You want to give us a little info about it?
Yes. So if you're thinking back, what is this Ratatouille game? Maybe I've played this. Yeah, it's a very on the nose, licensed, movie tie-in video game. If not, maybe the epitome of such a thing. It's your normal. I guess at this point it would be like a 3D platformer where you run around and do a bunch of things that somewhat tie in with the movie. So this is like typical tie-in material, if you ask me. A little bit information about this game. Had multiple developers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to be exact, for the various versions. Developers included Asobo Studio, Heavy Iron Studios, Helix, I think is how you pronounce that, Locomotive Games, and Universomo.
Wow.
Were all different developers of this game. So there's some different versions out there, which makes covering this a little more difficult. But we'll talk more about that. I'm not going to go through all of the dates of release because there's a lot. But the main ones that we're covering today, released in North America, June 26th of 2007, and then Europe a little bit later in September 28th of 2007. So thereabouts. I was, I think, a senior in high school when that happened. So here are the consoles that it came to, and oh by golly, are there many, because there's a lot. Let's see if I can list these all off in one breath. We've got GameCube, Game Boy Advance, J2ME, Microsoft Windows, mobile phone, Nintendo DS, OS X, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation Portable, Wii, and original Xbox.
Wow.
And the
360.
Yeah, 360 is not on there. Yeah.
Impressive, though.
Man, that's a lot of things to come out on.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and all of that, it's essentially a couple per studio.
Right.
And it's not quite as balanced as like each studio did two versions. Like Asobo did kind of the heavy lifting on this one with most of the versions.
Mm-hmm.
But dang, that's a lot of systems.
Do you know what J2ME is, Jeff?
Yes, that is the Java 2 Micro Edition port of Java that allowed it to run on mobile devices.
Did you actually know that, or did you look it up?
I was familiar with it. I had to look up the exact, like, what the ME was, but I knew what Java 2
Yeah, Java
was.
2.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, so that kind of dates that one. But
yeah.
so there was different versions. I guess we'll just go into our history with this game, and we can kind of discuss what versions we played. I had no history with this game, and so I picked up a copy of the Wii version on eBay for very cheap, and that's the version I played leading up to this episode. Jeff, do you have any history with this game?
I also do not have any history with this game, and I was sort of, when we were discussing doing it, was kind of trying to figure out how I wanted to get it, because I really didn't want to spend, I think it's like $20 on like the Xbox store.
Right.
And just the week we decided to do it, it went on sale. A bunch of Disney games went on sale. And so I think I got it either for $5 or $10, and I was like, okay, I can justify that. So I played it on the 360, and it's not backwards compatible on the One, so I actually had to go plug in my 360 again.
Ugh, that's
I know,
annoying.
first world problems. But it was a pain in the butt. That thing's a little hefty and has this gigantic power brick that I just kind of forgot about. Like, I cannot believe how big the power brick on the thing is. Anyway, I'm digressing. Yeah, so no history at all going into it. Just kind of played it blindly, and it's an interesting game. That's what I'll say now before we get into it. But with that, I suppose we can jump into our full gameplay discussion. All right, and okay, Google Docs, thank you. Just popped up with a grammar suggestion right as I was trying to read.
How helpful.
Like, right over top of what I was trying to read. Okay, so for gameplay discussion, we discuss the visuals, the audio, gameplay difficulty, story, and go through the levels. So we will start, as we often do, with the visuals of the game. Because we played two different versions, it'll be interesting to kind of hear what we each thought of it. So I'll go ahead and start with the 360 version. Overall, pretty good visuals for licensed games in general tend to be a little generic and simplistic looking, but this one, I don't know, it's got decent texture work, good color palette, matches the look of the film, which I liked. Some of the character models for the humans look a little wonky, but in general, they're not horrible. There's been far worse that we've covered. Trying to think if there's any great like lighting effects or like water effects, anything like that. Nothing really stands out. There is, I feel like there's a little bit of weather effect in the opening sequence as the rain kind of starts after the house, but
right.
Beyond that, I think there's like a nice glow in the restaurant and in the kitchen and stuff. But I don't know, nothing super duper impressed me, but it didn't look bad. What is your kind of hot take on it?
Well, so I played this, obviously the Wii version, which was a standard definition console.
Mm-hmm.
But I played it on my Wii U, so I don't know if that necessarily helped it. Probably not. But I don't know. It kind of looked crappy. Maybe a little bit better than your like an N64 game. I don't know. I kind of can like. The more I look at it, it kind of reminds me of the quality, which this isn't necessarily a compliment to the game, of like Conquer Live and Reloaded almost.
Interesting.
Almost like that level of quality of graphics, in my opinion. It looks like a original Xbox kind of. I don't know. And then that's more like the character models and some of the other things. There is some cool lighting effects and stuff like you mentioned, but I don't know. It's a licensed game, so I think they just kind of threw art assets around to everybody. Like, here you go, use this, and just downgrade it as much as you need to. But I imagine this probably didn't look much different if you were to play it on PlayStation 2, Xbox, or if you jumped up to the Wii version, because they're all that standard definition stuff, and so a lot of textures and things when you get up close to it just don't look very good.
Agreed.
So
even on the
unfortunately,
Xbox 360 version.
really, yeah,
I didn't really think about that. There's fur shading on the rats, and I don't know how much it was on the Wii version, but it actually looks pretty good on the 360
not
version.
much, not
Yeah.
much.
Okay, it
Maybe
actually does
some
look
of
a little
like
more Conquer-like.
maybe the cinematic stuff, maybe it would be a little better, but like the actual 3D models of them in game, it's just real blocky and
Yeah,
polygon looking. So
bummer.
I don't know. I maybe Conker's a weird comparison because he's all like furry and stuff, and these guys.
Yeah.
So maybe even in that regard, like it's better than this. But I don't know. This was way after that game came out, so I feel like it should be.
Well,
You know,
we say way after, but it's only 2 years after.
Is that all?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
But and to think, I don't know, and to think that a next gen, the Wii, you know,
Yeah.
a generation after the original Xbox, you'd think that it would be on a better level, but not necessarily.
Yeah, the interesting comparison there is that, if you think of what the Wii was hardware-wise, it was basically a double GameCube. It was like two GameCubes slapped together. A little more than that, but like for all intents and purposes. And, if you compare the original GameCube to the original Xbox, the original Xbox is about one and a half times more powerful than the GameCube. So to compare it to an original Xbox game may not be too much of a stretch.
Yeah, and I mean, Asobo made the PS2, Wii, GameCube, and Xbox versions, so yeah, it's probably very similar.
Yeah, and you think like that there were older generation releases. They had probably mastered the hardware. Like Asobo's a pretty good studio as far as visuals.
Yeah.
I mean, they've done a lot of modern ports of like. I feel like they worked on. I know they did like the Disneyland Adventure port for the Xbox One and some other Disney games. I mean, they work with Disney a lot. I think they worked on Infinity and stuff. So anyway, long story short with them is that they do better with graphics than maybe some other just generic port studios. So I think it was good to have them working on this one.
Yeah, and if it were up to me, I would strongly suggest if you did play a version to at least go for one of the higher def versions and maybe not the standard def ones, but that's just my opinion. So
yeah, that's probably good advice. I'd say the 360 one was not like breathtaking by any stretch, but it was definitely better looking than the footage I saw of the GameCube one. I watched a video of that.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So, anything else graphically that you wanted to call out, or would you like to move on to audio?
I guess the only other thing that I can think of that was somewhat visually cool, I guess, was the there's like these dream sequences in the game.
Oh yeah.
Where you're going through the air and there's like all these giant like food things that you're jumping over, and I don't know, like the clouds and stuff that are you're over top of, I think actually look pretty decent.
Yeah.
And you
Sorry.
I was just gonna say, and you can like see further out. In a lot of these levels, you can't really see far away, but in these sequences, you can kind of see the entire level and where you can go and not go and stuff. And so I think that part looks decent, looks pretty good for the time, because N64 games didn't have a really far like distance that you could see. So I don't know. That was the only other thing I thought of.
Interesting is that the 360 version does not have those same sequences. It does have dream sequences, but they are like single frame. They kind of look like, the best comparison I can think of is like the ukulele mini games, where the camera is kind of like high and away and zoomed out a little bit. And in these ones, it's like either you're running on a cylinder and avoiding obstacles as it rotates, or like there was other ones I didn't actually play, but it looks like it's a cube and you're avoiding different falling rectangles. I mean, they're not nearly as cool looking as the ones on the version you played, which is weird that they couldn't have at least matched that. There's some odd minor differences between these two versions, and I don't think we're going to go in depth too much with the other versions, but like for whatever reason, the PSP version is a completely different plot than all these other ones, whereas these ones share at least the same plot.
Right.
Very just random things that are slightly different. But anyway, yeah, I was kind of bummed that my version didn't have those whimsical kind of like, they reminded me a little bit of the Mario Sunshine levels where you're just kind of like in this abstract space floating in the clouds, or I think even Galaxy had a few of those. And it looked kind of interesting, little diversion. I don't know what the context of the game is, that if he ate a bad
I think
food.
he's just like in a culinary bliss because he loves food. And so like there's one that's just nothing but like grilled meat, and so you're jumping from like hot dogs to hamburgers to like shish kebabs. And so I think he's just like having like food hangover, or like he's like high on food or something. I don't know. They're grasping at straws of ways to come up with different things, but I kind of thought that the things themselves were stupid, but once you told me that your version didn't even have them, I'm kind of like, wow, that's kind of actually unfortunate. So maybe makes me appreciate it a little more.
Yeah, if you ever have a chance to check out footage from this one, you'll see like just how almost plain looking those sequences are in this one. It's just, they seem, I don't want to say lazy, but definitely not as cool as the other version. So alrighty then. With that, we'll jump into the audio. And the audio for this game is actually really good. It was maybe my favorite part of the whole game. It has the original voice cast, which is pretty rare, I feel like, for licensed games. It's not, I guess, not completely unheard of.
Right.
But for Pixar games in general, it's like Toy Story. I don't think they've ever had the real voice cast. They do usually get Tom Hanks' brother to do Woody, which is good for him. But Tim Allen has never done them, and a lot of the other characters. So this was cool to have Patton Oswalt, and I don't know any of the other voice casts, but Emil and I think Linguini and the whole kitchen staff. Yeah. I don't know if there's any substitutes, but in general, it's mostly the originals. The performances are pretty good. The writing is not excellent, and I think that sort of, some of the things get repeated or whatever, and that typical video game problem. But Linguini's voice, and like this first section when I played, where you're fixing the soup in the kind of stealthy area, it was kind of cool to have his real voice there, and it definitely made the connection for me better. Yeah,
and hopefully like studios realize like that makes a world of difference of like the level of immersion. If they can actually secure and get people to do it, like it makes a world of a difference on how much better it can be if you have that. So I don't know if they like tie that into people's contracts when they make the movie,
contract,
but yeah, it was nice. I don't know if there were any substitutes. There probably was. They might not have got everybody, but as far as I could tell, everybody was the actual person, and that was one of the big things a lot of other people loved about this game was especially when you're a kid, you usually catch that stuff pretty quick.
Definitely.
And so, going from Aladdin 1 to Aladdin 2, you can tell that that's not Robin Williams. And so it's hard to pull that over. Maybe some kids are they don't notice it, but at least for me, it was kind of noticeable. But
totally. Yep. It's always a big thing for me as well. And I think it's disappointing sometimes that tie-in games are just kind of like really just treated like marketing ploys. They're not really treated at the high quality standards that you would get from a full dev cycle and a AAA studio and all that, and it's weird because when we were kids, like AAA studios did make the tie-in games, and I think maybe that's why the old Super Nintendo and Genesis games were better received and higher quality, and
right.
It felt like it went down once we hit the 3D era, and I think it's because it just took longer to make games, and the development time was the same. It's like the movie takes this long to make, so the game has that same window.
Right.
And it's too bad. And sometimes tie-ins are made in conjunction. The one that comes to the top of my mind is not Disney, but it's Enter the Matrix. And they tried to give it a full production, and it still just wasn't that great. But I don't know if you ever played that one. But back to the audio,
yeah.
The music of this game is really good too. I enjoyed the soundtrack, and Something we've joked about before is like the sound, either the sound effects or the music test on our wives.
Right.
My wife
right.
really liked this one. She was like, "Oh yeah, I could hang out in the room while you're playing that," and that's saying something.
Gets the wife thumbs up.
That's right.
Nice.
Did you like? The
Yeah,
audio?
yeah. I think the music in this is really really good, and what maybe wasn't as apparent to me playing through, but then when I sat down later and pulled it up and started listening to it online, at one point I was like, "Is this actually even the music to the game, or did I like pull up the movie soundtrack?" Because it really did sound that good, and obviously we're getting to close to the era where you have that CD quality kind of stuff, but and so I don't know how much of it is original to the game or how much of it they just lifted from the soundtrack to the movie, but I don't know, it's got it all. It's got the French kind of feel with the accordion and that kind of thing, and it just really, I think, fit perfectly with the source material. And so like I said, I don't know if they just literally pulled it from the movie or
I don't
how
think
much
they
of it
did. I think it's
Okay.
all original because I do know the movie soundtrack pretty well, and I didn't feel like I ever recognized anything one for one.
Okay.
But I did like that they did tie in the actual movie themes. It's something we always have talked about on this show, is like, oh, I wish they would have used the actual music and not taken so many liberties with it. So
Right.
yeah, I agree. It fits in really well. It sounds like it was lifted from the soundtrack as like the ambient
Yes.
background music. So
Yeah, so great. When I looked it up online, I was reading through comments on like the YouTube video of it, and it was crazy how many people had commented that like it brought them back to being a kid and playing this game, or how nostalgic the music made them feel, which it's kind of weird for me to like think that a Ratatouille game would,
that
like
was
people
their
were saying
kid
they were like,
game. Yeah.
right, and like they're tearing up listening to it because it's so beautiful and stuff, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It's a crappy like movie tie-in game, but I do think the music itself, really does stand up well. So I think that compared with the phenomenal voice work, voice acting, definitely sets this one as the audio kind of being the stronger, and I think the visuals are a little weaker, and which isn't always the case necessarily. Sometimes the audio is kind
So
of the
true.
weak point. So
yeah, and on the 360, the visuals are a little bit better, and so I felt like the visuals and the audio were pretty strong, and then we'll get into it, but the rest of the game maybe not so much.
Ooh.
But yeah, and then the last thing is kind of the sound design and sound effects and all that. Off the top of my head, nothing really was terrible. There's a few redundant sound effects, as I mentioned earlier, with voice clips. Some of the jumping things are kind of like Looney Tunes sounding, which doesn't really match the feeling of the movie, but like whatever, it's a platform game, and it's sort of a feedback for, the thing I'm thinking of is when you're jumping from like a top of a skinny, I don't know if they're like poles or whatever, but there's like different parts where you're jumping, doing platforming from narrow thing to narrow thing, and it's like kind of boing boing. But
yeah, I agree.
Anyway,
there's definitely some cartoony sound effects that feel a little out of place at times. But there's some nice little like details. Like I like when you're running on all fours and stuff, you hear the little scurrying of the feet and stuff. So there's some sound effects that feel right and fit well, but then there's some that don't fit well, I think.
Yeah,
so.
Totally. I guess one thing we didn't touch on in the visuals was sort of the animations and stuff, which is something I think is important for doing Disney tie-ins.
Yeah.
And the main character animation is pretty good. He's got good run cycle, and when he jumps, he's got some kind of fluidity, and some weight to him, and he spins when he jumps, which is kind of cool, like rolls in midair. But some of the, like, specifically what comes to mind is when the boss characters are chasing you, which again we'll get into a little bit later. Their animations are maybe not so great. I don't know. They just look like robotic zombies and unnatural and not very fluid. So, it's a mixed bag, but at least Remy's animations are decent.
But then it's cool, like on the other end, because like the boss animations are like robots. But then when you get caught, there's like you lose cutscene, and you like get put in a jar, and he kind of makes this face. And so there's stuff like that where at times I think it's actually a lot better. But then certain animations just look a little clunky, I think. But most of the cutscenes play out really well.
Yeah.
There's no like ugly speech bubbles or anything.
Right.
At least in the main cutscene. So that's nice, I think. So I think the cutscenes work. I appreciate they're not like still images or something. They actually, fully, 3D animated them or whatever. But so.
Yep. Cool. Alrighty. I think we've pretty much covered the visuals and the audio now at this point. So now we'll jump into the meat and potatoes with the gameplay and the difficulty.
Yes.
Yeah. So overall, the game controls well, in my opinion. I didn't really have huge issues with like jumping and running and all that stuff. There's a couple of times, especially in those chase sequences, where it's like I just couldn't time my jump right and I would fall or run into things or whatever, which was kind of annoying. It does that run at the camera thing, Crash Bandicoot style.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Overall I didn't dislike the gameplay. The jumping and platforming seemed decently solid for a 3D tie-in game. The mini games, I didn't really get to too many of those. I think I did like the first one with the soup, but on the Xbox and PlayStation 3 version, it's almost entirely like you have a ingredient matched to a stick floating somewhere on screen as like a 2D icon, and you just have to move that as quickly as you can over a plate icon that's floating on the screen, which is really weird. I think the QuickTime event looking ones from the version you played that I saw look a little better and more enjoyable.
Yeah.
But, curious how those were for you and the gameplay in general.
Yeah. For the most part, I think it all played fine. I agree with you. The reverse view running toward the camera stuff for some reason just, I don't know if it was the controls necessarily or if it was just like the level design, but it just felt a little clunky. But the majority of the game is played out in, like we said, kind of this 3D platformer thing where you can change your camera angle and you run around and you jump, and thankfully you got your double jump. It's not a Disney game without double jumps, and so I mean a lot of them don't, but some of my favorites do. Yeah, and so really the way the gameplay kind of is set out, and it is a bit repetitive, but basically there's I think 13 levels in this game, but then each level has multiple missions that you can do, and so kind of like in some of the Tony Hawk games, you explore around, you find a person, you talk to them, and they have you do something, and while doing these things, you're always finding collectibles, hidden things, and some not so hidden things, and also like fighting bad guys or whatever. So as you do those, you also have side missions that you can do, or which are kind of actually more like mini games and that kind of thing. A big one are these pipe sliding sequences where you're going to, like, you're always in sewers in this game because for some reason, I guess because you're a rat, and so there's a lot of sliding down pipes and collecting things as you fall.
Except not in the 360 and PlayStation 3 version, interestingly. There's a lot of sequences in the sewers, but they're all platforming in this version.
So weird.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, yeah, there's none of that sliding stuff.
Interesting. Yeah. So, like, there's some different mechanics. There's, like, there's a part where you have to sneak around these, I think they're cats, and you have to kind of weave in and out without them seeing you. So there's a little bit of stealth thrown in, a little bit of everything, really. There's a part where you are on this the ball, and you gotta like balance on the ball and walk on top of it or whatever. Just all the kind of cliche stuff that you're used to in these kinds of games. I don't know. I kept thinking back to Pixar Rush that we reviewed. and I'm like, I feel like we kind of got a lot of this just in that game, and it was like, I feel like I would rather have just done the Pixar Rush. Like, I feel like it hit on everything, and I don't know. So I kept thinking of that, especially like on like the sliding parts. It was like, yeah, this is pretty much that game.
Yeah. What's interesting also, now that I'm scrubbing through a long play of the 360 version, I don't think you control Linguini in this one. I certainly didn't when I played it, but I didn't finish the whole thing. But looking through this footage, I don't see anything where you play as Linguini. Just some cooking games when I was talking about the move the stick over the plate.
Yeah,
which is a bummer.
Yeah, because you totally do in the version I played, which, if anything, that should have been like the majority of the game.
Right,
should have
that
been.
would have been a cool mechanic. And
yeah,
finding ingredients in the kitchen and make the right recipe and cook at the right time. Like, you could have made a cooking mini game that was more fun than most of these other mini games. Yeah.
And so
I'm really bummed that wasn't even part of this one.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of like the main kind of like plot point of the movie,
really,
even, you know. And so I don't know, but a lot of the mini games are kind of lackluster. Like, there's one where you're decorating a cake and you just press the buttons like you would in like any normal rhythm game, like your DDR kind of thing. And so I don't know. It just seems like they're like, we need a mini game here. Like, well, let's have them make a cake, and then we'll just have them like press buttons when it gets to the circle, and I don't know. So a lot of them kind of felt, yeah. So I don't know. I don't know what's better. Maybe it's better that they were like, hey, we're not going to put those stupid, worthless little rhythm or whatever mini games in. Like, we're just gonna stick to the main stuff. I don't know. Anytime you hear a game that doesn't have something in it, you automatically think, oh, that's going to be the worst version because it's missing content. Right, but you might actually be better off that you didn't have it. I haven't played all the mini games, so I can't really say if the majority of them are good or bad. But the ones I did play weren't necessarily like super strong games. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. I guess that's one thing. One thing I did think was kind of cool, and I don't know if you explored around in your menus a whole lot, but in the Wii version, there are a lot of unlockables and different things like in the menus that you can access as you play through the game. They even have like cheat codes. Nice. There's one where you can input it that has something to do with onions, and basically every time Remy jumps, he also farts, which is pretty great.
I didn't play around with the menu in mine, so I'm not sure if this one had that, but that's hilarious.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that was pretty funny. There's like bonus art that you can unlock. There's movie clips that you can watch, including a Wall-E teaser, which I thought was kind of interesting. Yeah, there's concept art, and then they have a bunch of multiplayer mini games as well that you can play, which I did not play because I didn't have a bunch of people around. And even if I did have friends over, I don't think that I have the I don't know what the word is. I'm not man enough to ask my friends to play this game with me that came out on the Wii for a good movie, but for an old movie. So yeah, so I didn't try those, but they definitely tried to come up with additional stuff to do and things to unlock. And so I know we heard through a buddy of ours on Twitter that the Xbox version has, I guess, a lot of achievements. So to actually like get all the achievements in this game is, I have to imagine, is probably pretty crazy because there's a lot of things to unlock and complete and stuff. Yeah. So, I don't know. So that's kind of a lot of the game. Yeah. So it's really just that over and over. Next level, you're back to 3D platforming. You're exploring around, finding collectibles, finding people. But a lot of it is really just based around like stealing food. Yeah. Which is kind of weird. And we'll talk about that with like the story part. Yeah. But a lot of that, you get some mini games, and then you have like your boss thing, which is those chasing sequences that we talked about, which are pretty darn awful. Like I looked through other people playing them, and like everybody's just dying, and
Yeah,
you don't really know what kills you until you do it, and then you got to start over, and I don't know. It's crazy that Crash could do it so well, but then years later we still like they couldn't figure it out. I don't know. I thought it was a neat idea because as you're running through these areas, the area you're traversing is being like destroyed behind you, which is kind of neat and visually, I guess, fun to look at. But
yeah, I think
at the
if
end,
it had more time, they could have really fine tuned it. But I think without the polish, it just doesn't work too well.
Right. Totally.
So, yeah, it's an interesting game because, again, like you said, the story's not really following exactly the movie, and then some of the levels where it's like, oh, we're in a marketplace, like a street market, and it's like, oh, what? Okay, and I mean, just weird, and then the old lady from the beginning comes back, which I don't know. It's kind of neat that they found a way to reincorporate her again. It's like, oh, we're probably not super far away from where she lives. She probably has to come into the city to get groceries, so it's not far-fetched.
Right.
But, it's still odd to just even have that at all. So yeah, different environments and some of them not from the movie. But yeah, so that pretty much sums it up. Little differences here and there, and then
yeah, so I think if you're a fan of the plot of the movie, I could see maybe you getting frustrated with this because it does deviate quite a bit at different points. But it doesn't deviate enough that you're like, oh, this is a different storyline.
Right.
Like, it's still close enough that it's basically the movie, but enough that it could probably piss you off if you're like, what are you doing? What is happening? Like, a lot of things kind of like you get reunited Remy gets reunited with his family like super quick,
like almost immediately
after, right? And it's just like, okay,
yeah.
But clearly they had to do that to come up with plot for them to use for their game. Like, oh, now you need to go help the other rats to do these side missions because otherwise who are you going to go to? So obviously they made some decisions based on trying to come up with a game, and so most of the games that we cover that are based off Disney movies are going to deviate to some degree, but like I said, I think it just depends how big a fan you are of the original. But this one deviates quite a bit. Nothing like overly ridiculous. Like even the marketplace is like, okay, yeah, that's not in the movie, but it's realistic to believe that there's a market that is somewhere near there that they could totally go off and expand the storyline off of. So that it didn't bother me as much, but I know a lot of people and some of the people's reviews that we looked into weren't a big fan of the deviation. So I don't know.
And I will just say it is weird, like to try and come up with enemies for the kitchen. It's like, oh, here's a crab. Oh, here's clams just jumping around. Like it's really weird and out of place. And like obviously they would not actually be doing that in a kitchen. I don't know. I mean, some of those make sense. There's like a frog at one point. That doesn't make as much sense. Well, they make sense of being in a kitchen, but like the clams are just out in the open, just jumping. Like it's really weird.
They got out, Jeff. They were supposed to be cooked, and they didn't get cooked.
And then to kill the crab, you have to give it hot sauce.
Right. Naturally, and then it explodes.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Right.
I don't know. Ratatouille is not really an action movie to begin with. It's like that's not the point of the movie. So I don't know. I feel like the route they went with this, like giving Remy attacks and stuff, like I don't know if that's necessarily what they should have done with this. If I were them, I feel like I would have tried to come up with something better. Like, hey, let's make this a cooking game, or let's make it a game about controlling Linguini the whole time, because that's kind of the whole point. And I don't know, and maybe those things are just, they're not enough to build a whole game off, but there are cooking games that are fun. What's the one that we played with the
Overcooked?
Overcooked.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, we don't play that together, but I know you play it.
I've played
it. Yeah, that's a whole game based on cooking. It's like super fun. And so I don't know. I feel like they could have just like the running around and fighting thing just doesn't really feel like it's in the spirit of what the movie was, because it wasn't like all of a sudden at one point the bad guys take over and Linguini gets kidnapped and Remy has to battle everybody to like win him back. Like it just, I don't know. So I get that that's kind of the trope with, 3D platformers is you run around and you fight off little things, and then to make things worse, you got the Wiimote, and so I'm like shaking it to do attacks and stuff, and it's like kind of
I didn't have that issue at least.
Well, that's true. So
thank goodness.
That's good.
But no, you're totally right, and I think they really took, I don't know if safe bet is the right.
Totally.
It's like the lazy bet, and I hate to call game devs lazy because I know they're not, but just somebody somewhere made the decision, whether it was marketing or whoever, is like, oh no, it needs to be like this or whatever. But it's like, you're absolutely right. It could have had way better use of the license in ways that made sense for it, and either still followed the plot of the movie or gone unique. Like it would have been cool to see a day in the life of Linguini outside of work and you're controlling him, or who knows, like, that whole part in the movie where he's like hungover and asleep in the kitchen and Remy's like controlling him, like that would have been a great mission, or like something like that, like a try and act natural. Right. It would have been cool. And like you said, anything cooking, either if it's recipe driven or slicing something, or I don't know, you could have done either precision type gameplay where you're trying to like get the right proportions into a meal, or mixing the right ingredients based on environmental clues. I don't know. There's a million routes they could have taken, and I feel like they took the safest one.
Yeah, and I don't know, and maybe I'm being like way too like overthinking it. And you're right, it's totally a safe bet. They know the formula works. They probably only had so much time to do it, and so they didn't have time to sit around and go, all right, what is the true meaning behind this movie, and how can we like create a game that encapsulates that? Like, I get that that's not necessarily realistic. I actually think the dream sequences probably make the most sense out of like the whole thing. It's a good way to explore a character's like fascination with food without him battling little minions the whole time. It's literally just platforming, and you're exploring around this area full of foods, and I think that works well.
Agreed. And I think even tying it back to like the spirit of the movie, whenever he mixes two flavors in his mouth and he has that little like out of body experience with like the dancing colors, it sort of ties into that, so it makes sense for his character. So totally, I like that too.
I guess another positive thing is this game benefits the fact that your main character is a mouse. So these areas that you get to explore are obviously much bigger, and so it makes certain areas just kind of a little more enjoyable to traverse, and there's fun ways to get around to different things. You're platforming off, at one point you're like jumping on baguettes and muffins and things in like this area, and so it creates some fun places to kind of jump around, which is cool.
Totally. No, I like that you can like run underneath the ovens and like the fire, just like in the movie you can kind of see it come on. And I do really like the camera is like this fisheye super wide angle lens, which makes it look the environments look even bigger. So I thought that was kind of cool. Kind of makes you feel more like you're a little mouse than if the camera was more traditional 3D platformer. It's interesting because it's like the dimensions and all that, it make it very similar to like Toy Story 2 and 3, the 3D ones. So yeah, pretty cool.
Nice.
All right.
Yeah. I guess last thing. The formula itself, I think, just kind of outstays its welcome. I didn't play the game in its entirety, but I just don't feel like they shake it up enough, toward the end. So I could see a lot of people who did play this just getting burnt out eventually and being like trying to keep pushing forward when it's just more of the same. So I think it hurts from that. But once again, when you're on a time crunch, you come up with your 13 levels and you just kind of make it happen. You do what you can, and maybe you don't have, the support from above to like come up with new things. You come to, hey, I came up with this great idea. Like, no, we don't have time for that. Just do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I get that. I try to understand, but I think it definitely hurts it. So
Yeah. It's weird that there are as many levels as there are because I guess because they're smaller, they felt they needed to have more or something. I don't know. They're not horribly small, but yeah, the redundancy just like they could have done half as many levels and maybe done a few different types of missions in the level, more like Tony Hawk, like you were saying.
right.
So that's too bad. But with that, we should jump into the story and the levels and kind of just tie those together. As we've mentioned multiple times, the story very, very loosely follows the movie, but it really does deviate a lot. So, you start out in the yard or the farmhouse outside of the old lady's house in the French countryside, and that kind of puts you through tutorial or whatever. And then before you get inside the house and the action sequence really happens, it just kind of cutscenes you away down to the river, which is a bummer. I thought that would be a cool action sequence for the ending, unless I'm just not remembering it. But I feel like they just glossed over that.
Yeah, no, they totally do. It's all cutscene. All of a sudden you're in the river. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a bummer. The tutorial is fine. It gives you Emil just kind of gives you different tasks to do around I guess it's a barnyard.
Yeah.
And you learn the ropes of the mechanics and all that. I think it's a good tutorial. It's, if not a little long. It's like a good 25-30 minute tutorial. But yeah, and then from there, so that's similar-ish to the movie. There's a little more elaborate, but works. Then you're on the river, avoid obstacles. That one was kind of Connect.
Yes, absolutely.
Pixar Rush.
Yep.
So that was fine. And then you get to the sewers somewhere underneath Gusteau's restaurant, and then eventually. But from there, it's like suddenly you're with your brother and your family again, and you're helping rats do different things, and it's just like, wait, what? This is not in the movie. This is not anywhere how the movie goes. It's kind of
like stealing food from Linguini after you become friends with him is just like he doesn't do that in the movie until the very end when he gets mad at him, like
upset. Yeah.
Right. So I get that they needed things to do, and so for some reason this was like the best subplot they could come up with. Like, we'll just have him helping his rat relatives steal food the whole time. And it's like,
and again, something they could have done to make that work and make the game more interesting is maybe helping them outside of the restaurant or something. I don't know, like not stealing from Linguini, but stealing from a rival restaurant, or who knows?
Something.
I don't know. There's it's like, I don't know, maybe some neighborhood bully cat thing, and you have to steal from that cat's owner. I don't know. Maybe not like that, but it just seems odd. Like it's at odds with the character and the plot of the movie. So other than that, it's kind of like you go through the motions. You have these different levels with different objectives, and then I don't know if we want to go through level by level.
Yeah, we really don't need to. I mean,
kind of name them, but it's like you're in the streets of Paris. There's one called Home Stink Home where you're in the sewer. The soup assistance mission, kitchen, another Paris-y one, leaky pipes, so like a lot of sewer stuff. Little Chef Big Kitchen, which I think that's the one that's different from the Xbox one, where I assume these are the levels from the GameCube one where
I think so. I think they are.
But then back to Underground, then the City Market, like the made up part. Slide of Your Life, which is definitely not in so these are from the other version, but
right.
And then the deserted kitchen at the end, and then the ending where you essentially are trying to escape. Is it Skinner, the old chef? And he gets freaking crushed by a chandelier, like, and the restaurant, like the pillars fall over and break. Like it's really weird.
Yeah,
like,
it is weird.
I don't know, the health inspector thing just wasn't as good for video game, or if like this big action sequence where you destroy the restaurant gets you to the same ends but not the same way of doing it. I don't know what their thought process was, but
right.
Yeah, you basically kill Skinner at the end. So
yeah, they just needed some big climactic finish and
Looney Tunesy. Yeah.
And I guess like you could argue that Ratatouille doesn't necessarily have like a huge like finale. I mean,
Right.
like you said,
Yeah.
the final thing is they get a really good review, and then he shows the food critic that it's a mouse or a rat, and then it's like, okay, then everyone lived happily ever after. So it was kind of missing that Looney Tunes big conclusion kablooey thing.
Yeah.
So chandelier it is.
Yep. Well, with that, do you want to go through final thoughts?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So I'll start. Basically, it's a decent tie-in game. There was a lot of effort put into it. It's not bad per se, but it's bad. I think if you've gotten this far in the episode, you can understand that it's like they tried a few different things. They kind of stuck to the 3D platformer thing and threw in some mini games here and there, and it just gets repetitive. The graphics are decent looking, and the more I'm looking through even a Let's Play right now, the 360 version, there's some good like lighting reflections on the environment and stuff like that. Specular highlights, I think, is what the term would be. And so it's not an ugly game. The textures can be a little muddy up close, but in general, the broader look of the levels, the art design is good. Good audio in general, great voice acting and music. And so for me, I enjoyed the package, but I didn't really enjoy playing the game. If that makes any sense at all. It was like, okay, I see what they're doing here. It's a good mindless little romp that has, if I can just let go of the fact that it's not like the movie really at all, I can enjoy it for small bursts. I think I ended up in total playing like 2 or 3 hours right off the bat, and then kind of just like, okay, I know what this game is like. I'm not really feeling compelled to get to the ending. And I think that's kind of the best way to describe it. Like, you can enjoy it, but it's not by any stretch a masterpiece.
Right.
How about your thoughts?
Normally, with these games, I usually say if you enjoy the source material, you should check it out, because at least you would enjoy it if you're a fan. But I don't even know if I can say that with this one. It's not complete garbage. It is playable. There are a lot of people that have good memories playing this game, as kids, and so like I get the value in that. I think it's just such a big turnoff to me that they tried so hard to have this game available for any and all platforms that could play it, and so that to me kind of just makes it feel like it's just like really sold out.
Cash grab,
yeah, it's a cash grab, and so a lot of these things, the faults of this game, just become that much more apparent, because it's like, well, maybe if you'd focused up and maybe put your money towards developing it for a very small group of consoles, you might have been able to have a better product. I don't know, and maybe that wouldn't be the case if they had only done it for like 2 consoles. But it's hard not to think that way. Is like, man, this could have been a lot better if they would have just, I don't know, focused up and maybe worked with the source material a little bit better. But I agree with everything you said. Visually, certain parts are fine. Others maybe not so great. Audio stuff is definitely its strong point. The music's great and the voice acting's really good. So I don't know. I don't think I would necessarily recommend this. But if it was on sale and you liked, nope, I'm not even gonna say that. Nope. No, I gotta stick to my guns. I just don't think this is that great. I'd rather play Toy Story 2 on the N64 than play this.
Agreed.
I think that's just a better game. I do appreciate that they put a little bit of variety in to try to not make it seem super stale, even though it's still in the end just becomes way too repetitive. Too many sliding missions, too many boss running aways, and too many little side quests or little mini games, and I don't know. I did like the unlockable stuff. I liked that there was a lot of stuff in the menus that you could try to unlock. I thought that was cool. Those are my final thoughts.
Excellent. Alrighty, well there it is, Ratatouille, the video game. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this week. Glad to be back, and if you would like to, you can follow us on Twitter at mouse_bytes, bytes with a Y. Also, you can find us on thenintendovillage.com. From there, you can find links to every episode, as well as other great shows, reviews, and other content. And our episodes are also on the YouTube channel for Nintendo Village, so if you'd like to see gameplay along with each episode, you can check us out there as well. So once again, thank you, and join us next time for the very classic Lion King. With that, have a great day.
See you guys.
And remember, everyone can cook. Although that doesn't mean that everyone should.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, check out some of our other videos, and visit thenintendovillage.com, your home for everything Nintendo.